So if you've watched this show in the past, then you know that I often talk about how the United States is technically at war with multiple countries simultaneously. We are currently doing drones in Libya, Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Syria, Iraq, and Afghanistan. And I mean, we've outright invaded Afghanistan and Iraq. So we are at war with multiple countries, but unbeknownst to a lot of us, we're actually occupying a lot more countries than many of us even knew about. So a few weeks ago, Trump was openly feuding with Myeshia Johnson, who is the widow of David Johnson, a U.S. soldier that actually died while he was on patrol in Niger. Myeshia claims that Trump made her cry during his call to her because he reportedly was callous and told her that David knew what he signed up for. Now, yes, it is the case that the story shed light on just how petty Donald Trump is to openly feud with the widow of a dead soldier. I mean, it shows that he has no class, no integrity whatsoever, but I think there's a more important aspect of this story that came to light, and people kind of took a step back and said, well, wait, hang on a second. What are we doing in Niger? Why are we there? Because apparently we have 1,000 U.S. troops, almost 1,000 U.S. troops currently in Niger. So Peter Serto of Common Dreams explains, if you were surprised to learn the U.S. has nearly 1,000 troops in Niger, you're not alone. Senator Lindsey Graham, a South Carolina Republican who serves on the Armed Forces Committee, told NBC he had no idea. Neither did Chuck Schumer, the Senate's top Democrat. Now, let me remind you that Chuck Schumer and Lindsey Graham, these are members of Congress. Congress is supposed to authorize war, but they don't even know that we've invaded and are now occupying a different country. They had no idea. Now, just because we may not be at war with the governments of Niger or Pakistan or Yemen or Somalia, it doesn't mean that we're not waging war there. We're fighting non-state actors, presumably, right? So you still need Congress's approval for that. But if you think that, 7 wars or 8 wars now with Niger is a lot, well, according to a report from the New York Times, we are currently occupying way more countries. And this story blew my mind. Are you ready? Are you ready for the number of countries that we currently have U.S. troops in? We currently have more than 240,000 U.S. troops in 172 different countries. Not even kidding. So as you can see from this chart, we have U.S. troops in almost every single country in the world, excluding Iran, South Sudan, Myanmar, and the Western Sahara, which is currently being occupied by the Moroccan military, and there's a few others. And let's be clear here, a lot of these countries just have as low as 1 troop there, but there's a substantial amount of countries where we have upwards of 100 troops there. So according to the editorial board of the New York Times, they report that the United States has been at war continuously since the attacks of 9/11 and now has just over 240,000 active duty and reserve troops in at least 172 countries and territories. While the number of men and women deployed overseas has shrunk considerably over the past 60 years, the military's reach has not. American forces are actively engaged not only in the conflicts in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, and Yemen that have dominated the news, but also in Niger and Somalia, both recently the scene of deadly attacks, as well as Jordan, Thailand, and elsewhere. An additional 37,813 troops serve on presumably secret assignment in places listed simply as unknown. The Pentagon provided no further explanation. There are traditional deployments in Japan, 39,980 troops, and South Korea, 23,591, to defend against North Korea and China if needed, along with 36,034 troops in Germany, 8,286 in Britain, and 1,364 in Turkey, all NATO allies. There are 6,524 troops in Bahrain and 3,055 in Qatar, where the United States has naval bases. America's operations in conflict zones like those in Africa are expanding. 400 American Special Forces personnel in Somalia trained local troops fighting the Shabab Islamist group, providing intelligence and sometimes going into battle with them. One member of the Navy SEALs was killed there in a mission in May. On October 14th, a massive attack widely attributed to the Shabab on a Mogadishu street killed more than 270 people, which would show the group's increased reach. About 800 troops are based in Niger, where 4 Green Berets died on October 4th. Whether this largest will continue is unclear, but the larger question involves the American public and how many new military adventures, if any, it is prepared to tolerate. So this report is just mind-blowing. And really, it doesn't matter how many military adventures the American people are willing to tolerate, because you have continuity of U.S. imperialism across parties, across administrations. George Bush, Barack Obama, Donald Trump, we see continuity. So it really doesn't matter, even if we are opposed to it. A majority of people are against the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. It doesn't matter. Are we pulling out? No, not at all. Now, another thing that's important is the War Powers Clause of the Constitution. So I want to read that to you. Article 1, Section 8, Clause 11 of the U.S. Constitution grants Congress the power to declare war. The President, meanwhile, derives the power to direct the military after a congressional declaration of war from Article 2, Section 2, which names the President Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces. Now, let me ask you all this. Do any of you remember Congress declaring war in Niger or Somalia or Yemen? Because I don't. So we see the U.S. empire expanding to all of these countries and not a single declaration. And of course, yes, this came with changes that George W. Bush implemented. We all know this as the Bush Doctrine. But that's continuing today. Obama didn't stop the Bush Doctrine, and Donald Trump certainly isn't going to stop the Bush Doctrine. So now the United States is occupying 172 countries, and in many of them, we're just outright waging war. And again, I want to be clear here. Just because we're not at war with the governments of these countries doesn't mean that we're not waging war, because even if you are fighting Al-Shabaab or the Taliban, that's still non-state actors that you are waging war with. It's still war. You can try to reframe it, but it's war. War is war. If you have our troops there, that's war. We need to know about it, but we don't. Who knew about this? Who knew that we were in so many different countries? Yes, many of us knew that there were over 900 military bases around the world, but when it comes to all these sub-Saharan countries in Africa, who knew that we had so many troops there? So it's not just Pakistan, Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Afghanistan, and Libya. It's all these countries. It's basically the whole world with the exception of a few countries. At what point do we come together as a society and demand that the United States bring these troops home, bring all of them home, and stop waging wars that do nothing to stifle terrorism? Nothing. The war on terror has been a complete and utter failure, just like the war on drugs, but we are continuing them because it's a business. In the United States of America, war is a business. To the U.S. empire, we make money. We prop up the military-industrial complex because this is how we try to stimulate the economy and create jobs. Well, how about this? Why don't we direct that money elsewhere so people don't have to die? I don't know how this isn't just, taking up 100% of the time on mainstream media news outlets. I don't get it. This is huge. This is absolutely unacceptable.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.